It is time for a new Pokemon Pocket tier list update using PokemonMeta.com, as it has been about 10 days since the new Mythical Island pack release and a lot has changed. In fact, the new #1 deck is a big surprise to me that I did not see coming. Using the tier list on PokemonMeta.com means that the tier list will be objectively, automatically updated. This is not opinionated. It's using all community tournaments, and the larger the tournament that the deck is topped in, it's going to have a bigger power rating influence on the tier list. And we're going to be using Bella VGC's overview for a lot of the deck lists just to get started. So big shout out to Bella. Thank you very much. And we are starting off at tier 3. I will go back to tier 4 at the end of the video as they will be honorable mentions. So let's begin with Arcanine EX. What is this deck? Let's read the overview. This archetype remains solid and versatile, often paired with Charizard for synergy. Now, when it is paired with Charizard for synergy, that will mostly be in the Charizard deck itself. So you're going to see for the Arcanine EX deck itself, it's just going to be Arcanine Moltres plus usually a tank Pokemon like Mew. Now, the deck also gained a new tanking option, Mew with Budding Expedition, which can be utilized either defensively or offensively. This is a big meta change with the new pack, and it's essentially the tanking meta. You either tank with a card like Mew, Druddigon, or Tauros. How that works is you have them in the active Pokemon spot while you build up your bench. You'll have, let's say, a Growlithe on the bench. You're going to start putting fire energy onto it. Then you're going to slowly evolve it into an Arcanine. Meanwhile, you're just tanking their hits with Mew, Druddigon, or Tauros. And then when you're ready with your Arcanine or your Charizard, whatever you're building up on your bench, you're going to whip out your Leaf. You're going to activate Leaf to make your active Pokemon 2 less to retreat. So it's very important that your tanking Pokemon is costing 2 retreat or less. So for example, Snorlax, is this a good tank? It's got 150 health. That's more than Tauros, Druddigon, and Mew, but it's got a retreat cost of 4. So when you're ready to whip out your benched evolved Pokemon with all its energy, the Snorlax is going to be way too heavy to pull out with the Leaf. And one of my predictions was that Leaf was going to be too slow to play. And boy, was I wrong, because it does conflict with Professor Research, where you would not be able to use Professor Research in the same turn as activating a Leaf, or in the same turn as using Professor Research. Now, what I'm wrong about is that the Leaf actually changed the meta to make the meta slower, to adapt around the Leaf, making essentially Leaf made itself good by slowing down the meta. So if the meta were to ever speed up, then Leaf would completely fall off. But because we have good tanking options like Druddigon and Tauros to be paired up with the Leaf, that is why the Leaf ended up being actually really good. So if we read the Druddigon real quick, if this active Pokemon is damaged by an attack from the opponent, you deal 20 damage for free onto their attacking Pokemon. You're not going to build up a Dragon Claw. You're just going to keep reflecting damage and then pull this out for your main Pokemon. And then even better, when you have the Budding Expeditioner paired up with Mew, that's going to be a heal. You're going to heal your Mew and return it back and retreat. And then the Mew itself, even if you're not using Psychic Energy, with 3 Genome Hacking Energy, you're going to copy one of your opponent's active Pokemon attacks. So for example, a big attack that you can copy would be Mewtwo's 150 Side Drive to deal 150 to Mewtwo's health. It would be a one-shot. And that is essentially what's happening with the tanking meta. Now that we got the tanking meta out of the way and you understand that with Leaf and Budding Expedition and why Snorlax is not good, let's go back on over to Arcanine. Arcanine is great because it deals 120 damage for just 3 energy, and it only has to evolve once. So let's say you want to play something like Charizard instead. Charizard, you have to evolve twice. It's 4 energy to Crimson Storm. And if you're playing against a top tier deck like Pikachu, you only need 120 damage to one-shot the Pikachu, which would mean something like Arcanine EX would do the job better than a Charizard, much more efficiently knocking this Pokemon out. Now, let's see an example of some deck lists here. You could see a sample deck list from a recent tournament getting top 4. Let's highlight the top 8. Top 32, top 8, top 32, top 32, top 8. Let's now switch on over to another deck. We're now moving on to Aerodactyl EX. Now, while we don't have a write-up for Aerodactyl, let's explain this real quick. Aerodactyl itself is quite interesting. This has the ability Primeval Law. Your opponent cannot play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their active Pokemon. Now, what I just told you, the main strategy of the game right now is to tank with a Pokemon in the active spot and evolve your bench. That means this does nothing to that strategy because it does not stop them from evolving their bench. But if they only have one Pokemon on their bench, let's say their Charmander just turned into a Charmeleon and it's just the only card in their bench, you can now use Sabrina. Pull the Charmeleon out of the bench, and while in the active spot, they cannot evolve their active Pokemon, which you're going to force out with the Sabrina. Now, there's a card that may come out in the future that is a more specific Sabrina. At the moment, if your opponent has multiple bench Pokemon, they get to choose what becomes the active. And in the Pokemon TCG, there's a card that lets you choose the bench Pokemon to force it into the active spot. So even if they have multiple active Pokemon, it will not protect them from that card if it were to ever come out. The problem with Aerodactyl, I would say, is that its basic Pokemon being the old Amber, it's not going to be a part of the inherent mechanic within Pokemon Pocket that guarantees a basic Pokemon in your opening hand. You're going to have to hard draw the old Amber to then evolve it into the Aerodactyl. Now, it looks like this deck is using and abusing Marshadow. If any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage, you get to then deal an additional 60 damage. Revenge is going to deal 100 damage, but because it's a fighting type attack against a popular card like Pikachu, weak to fighting, means that it's going to deal that additional 20 damage. It's going to be a 120 damage one-shot KO onto the Pikachu. Now, if I just told you that keeping your Pokemon on the bench with an active tank is the meta, what's a good way to counter that meta? It would be something like Hitmonlee. Any Pokemon that can attack the bench is going to be good in a meta where the Pokemon is sitting on the bench. And Hitmonlee is perfect for that. Deal 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemons. Keep poking them with the stretch kick. And then if they ever kill your Hitmonlee, you then whip out your Marshadow and kill them back. So that's why this deck would be good. Let's see some sample deck lists here. We have a top 16 of a recent tournament. Here is a second place. Top 32, top 32. And I also will later on in this video, we're going to go to the top decks page and we'll click on first place deck list to see what decks, even rogue decks, are just winning the entire event. Because sometimes some players can take a really strange deck and just win it all. And that can be great inspiration for you on wanting to play that deck, even if it may not be on the tier list. Now, let's go back on over to the tier list as we're going to be done with Aerodactyl. Let's talk about Greninja. Now, you may be thinking Greninja is not a new card, but it is a new deck. How's it a new deck? Let's read this. Greninja is emerging as a standalone deck after being featured in various combinations. It has shown flexibility, commonly paired with Tauros, Mew, and Druddigon, aka the three main tanks. Other popular builds include partnerships with Marshadow and Hitmonlee, or Behem and Jinx. Greninja's adaptability makes it a prominent contender in the current meta, despite it just being in Tier 3. So what did we talk about earlier on why Hitmonlee is good? Because it attacks the bench. What does Greninja do? It attacks anything, and it doesn't have to be in the active spot. From the bench, your Greninja could be throwing out those water shurikens for 20 damage anywhere. Your bench Pokemon are not going to be safe from the Greninja. And then you also compare this up, like you said, some of them playing Hitmonlee, 15%. Now, what you may be noticing here is while Druddigon Tauros is being used alongside Leaf, we also have Mew, but without Budding Expeditioner. That is because the Mew is only a single retreat cost. This is still good even without playing the Budding Expeditioner. So if you don't have room for Budding Expeditioner, and also you maybe don't want to play it because it's a bricked card if you don't have Mew, the Mew by itself is perfectly fine, especially in a deck like this where it's not a high priority to swap your bench onto the field. It's completely okay to keep your Mew on the field and even build up the genome hacking instead of building up your bench for that big play. So this looks like a nice, well-rounded deck. Not going to be too crazy. Let's read the Behem and the Jinx, though. Mind Jack. This does 20 more damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. What? We are loving attacking the bench. Well, this doesn't attack the bench. Let me correct myself. 20 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So in a bench Pokemon meta, they're building up the bench for just one psychic energy. You're dealing an extra, what, 30, 50, 70 damage, 90 damage if they are weak to psychic. And then we also have the Jinx. This attack deals 20 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So we're going to be thinking about, let's say, if we had a Pikachu, that's going to be 2 additional energy damage. That will be an extra 40 damage. So double Psychic would be able to 2-shot the Pikachu. And if we look at a Mewtwo, the Mewtwo would maybe have 3 energy, or the thing is, it's going to detach 2 psychic energy to even do its attack. But if they were to ever have 4 energy at a time, that's going to be 4 times 2, 80 more damage, 110 damage with that psychic attack. And let's see some deck lists here from Greninja. We got a first place deck list. Tom Hagano, Pocket Turtle Weekly 287 player event. Wow. Double Mew, double Druddigon, double Leaf, and a Budding Expeditioner. We are super taking advantage of tanking and then water shurikening them to death, I guess. That is insane. It puts them on the clock. They're going to be forced to attack into the Druddigon, or the Greninja from the bench is just going to wipe out all their Pokemon. This is crazy. And when you put your opponent on pressure like that, it's going to trick them into misplays. They're going to kill themselves swinging into the Druddigon, reflecting that 20 damage every time. We got a top 16 deck list here. We have Tauros instead of the second Mew, a top 8 deck list, a top 4 deck list, and let's move on to another tier deck. We're now going to be looking at Charizard EX at tier 3. Charizard's popularity has taken a hit recently due to the rise of Gyarados and the deck's inherently slower playstyle. Despite this, Charizard is seeing a resurgence as more players gravitate towards it in response to the increasing usage of Celebi and Mewtwo decks. Its strong matchups against these popular options make it a viable tier 2 contender, which currently we have it at tier 3, but it remains overshadowed by the higher tiered decks. Now, what is going on here? I told you that the Arcanine could be used in Charizard to help one-shot the Pikachu, but he specifically mentioned that Charizard is good against Celebi and also against Mewtwo. Let's look at Celebi. Celebi is going to be at 130 health and then weak to fire. So you have your Charizard dealing 220 damage. That kills a Celebi. You have the Arcanine dealing 140 damage. That kills a Celebi. You have Charmeleon, enough to 2-shot the Celebi. It does 80 damage in 2 attacks if you're going to get desperate here. But mostly the Arcanine and the Charizard being able to one-shot the Celebi, that is going to be a great play. And then if we look at Mewtwo, the Mewtwo at 150 health, that's quite chonky. It gets one-shot by the Charizard 200 Crimson Storm. I think a big downside with the Charizard deck is 2 things here. Because you have to play so many cards to make the Charizard viable, it's not able to take advantage of the new tanking meta. We can't really fit in the good tanks like Mew, Tauros, and Druddigon, plus putting the Leafs in to pull them out, then whip out your Charizard at the same time. We're more reliant on the Moltres helping build up your Charizard, which you have to do from the active spot, where instead another Pokemon like Gardevoir can help build up your energy from the bench. And also Charizard is suffering from having to evolve twice. We have no card in the game right now to search for Charizard or search for Charmeleon. And I think we soon will have that card. I was hoping that this would be the set that gives us a way to search for an evolved Pokemon. Maybe the next set, Copium again, will be finally the one that allows us to search for evolved Pokemon. Then you could tell me what evolved Pokemon deck you're most excited for when you could finally search, even randomly, just randomly search for, let's say, a stage 1 or stage 2 Pokemon. That would still be a big boost to these decks. We have a first place deck list there. We're going to look at that in a bit. We have second place deck list from the Curry Poke Cup. Very nice. It's got 1 Mew. We got the Goizasam 287 player event top 32, a top 8, and then the first place deck list from a 64 player event, 1 Mew. We have the 1 Leaf. So those are going to be the 2 new card additions to the deck based off compared to the previous set. Here's another second place tournament finisher from a 135 player event. Let's move on to the next deck list. Now, Brock. What? Brock is quite new. And in my review of the new Brock card, I thought that the new Brock card would be good. Let's look at the card. That card is Golem. Oh my goodness. Let's read this about Golem real quick. Let me scroll on down here on my end. Golem, highlighted by a win at a 1,500 player tournament. We're going to be looking at that 1,500 player event where this got first place. And since that first place finish, the deck has become a lot more popular. This achievement came without facing tough counters like Celebi. So Celebi would counter this, but a lot of people were dropping Celebi because they were losing to fire. Sometimes a big part of a Pokemon tournament is just having favorable rock, paper, scissor matchups. Now, the Celebi matchups would have impacted its performance, most likely. Golem's new viability stems from its bulkiness and ability to deal enough damage, effectively one-shotting Pikachu and Mewtwo decks. The deck also has a favorable matchup spread against Gyarados, and also when Hitmonlee is drawn early. Druddigon remains a key asset in this deck, providing enough time for Golem to evolve and charge its energy. Again, we have the tank meta. Build up with the tank as, well, keep the tank in the active slot, build up your bench, and then when you're done building it out, whip out your bench and get sweeping. Guard press for 120 damage. We have 160 health. And when you guard press, this Pokemon takes 30 damage less from attacks. It's so difficult. The Golem is essentially not just at 190 health. If it could tank at least 2 attacks, that's going to put it at least 220 health plus on the Golem. That is crazy. And then you can also use a potion to boost it up a little bit. Now, let's look at the deck list here. Let's look at that first place tournament finish, which it was actually quite a while ago since it has happened. So we're going to go on here, we're going to type Golem, and we're going to click on first place. First place of 2 different events. This is going to be the 1,500 player event from the Ursi Day Pocket Weekly. 1,500 players. This is what won it all, and I think has since then skyrocketed its popularity on the way to play. We also see a Marshadow here to avenge your killed active Pokemon. It's so funny that I already don't want to attack your active Pokemon because it's going to reflect 20 damage, but then when I finally come through on killing your active Pokemon, because let's say I don't have a Sabrina, you're then going to avenge your tanky Pokemon that was reflecting damage with the Marshadow. And then after that, even if I'm playing aggressive, you will eventually likely get to that Golem to hit me for that 120 every single turn, plus have that big damage buff or that 30 damage protection. Absolute insanity. Let's go on back over to the Brock breakdown. Now let's read the Brock skill specifically. Take your energy, it's going to be a fighting energy, from your energy zone and attach it to a Golem or Onyx. That is going to be a good way to get the energy up on it early. Very nice. So you already saw the first place deck list. Obviously, the downside is how slow it will be to build up the Golem. It's going to go from Geodude to Graveler to Golem. No way to search Golem. No way to search the Graveler. But just by tanking with Druddigon or, poking them down with an early Hitmonlee comboed up with a Marshadow, that could help bide enough time to then whip out that Golem. I really like this play style where you have lurking in the darkness, in the cave, you're slowly building Golem, and once it's finished, your opponent is done. So if you like that slowish play style like that with the bulky Golem, this will be your deck to play. Here's a top 16 finish, top 32, another top 32. Looks like they're all very similar to the deck that won the 1,500 player event. Very nicely done. And we're also using and abusing, of course, the Leaf, as we said earlier. Pull back the Druddigon when your Golem is ready. Now, let's also combo it up with the Giovanni, which I did see in the event itself. Giovanni's going to make the Golem deal 130 damage. And then if we're looking at a Mewtwo, the Mewtwo is at 150 health. It is not weak to fighting, so it's actually not going to be able to one-shot it, but the Mewtwo also can't one-shot the Golem, so that is worth noting there. Let's move on to another deck list. Now we're moving from Tier 3 on to Tier 2. Tier 2, we have Mewtwo and Celebi. Let's start off with Celebi. I thought Celebi would be a new Tier 1 deck. I was wrong. And I think a big downside of the deck is the fact that it does require luck. Even if the numbers are on your side, if you flip 2 coins, you should be able to deal 50 damage at least. But that's, in actuality, that's just not how things play out. It's not about flipping 2 coins. It should be, statistics generally, you'll see them come in line with averages once you see yourself flipping 100 coins, if not up to 1,000 coins. And we don't have time to flip 1,000 coins to get average damage done here. We're going to have many duels where our powerful Bloom simply is going to be tails, 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 and thus dealing 0 damage. So what am I even yapping about? What can Celebi do exactly? It is flip a coin for each energy attached to deal 50 damage each, and you would think you're gaining 1 coin every turn. No, you're gaining 2 coins every single turn because of the very powerful Superior. The Jungle Totem ability, while this is on the bench, states that each grass energy attached to your grass Pokemon provides 2 grass energy. So by 3 energy on this, you're flipping 6 coins for an average of 150 damage. But again, an average over 6 coins, you could go way below the average or go way high. And let's see what we have written up about Celebi here. Celebi, with much anticipation, hype, and high expectations, especially from me, many players predicted Celebi paired with Superior, referred to as Celebi Serpy, would dominate the meta. But its performance has been mixed. While Celebi Serpy remains popular, the deck seems to be performing best when paired with Exeggutor, offering versatility and additional strategic depth. However, it's still uncertain whether the deck will solidify its place in Tier 2 or fade due to meta shifts. Yeah, I guess this is a big surprise that this is not a new best deck. I guess it does not only comes down to the coin flips, but it could take a while to build up your Superior. You can't assume that you're going to have the Superior on the field every single duel for your Celebi to be flipping coins like crazy. Now, let's see some of the deck lists here. Now, despite that, we have a first place tournament top in deck list, 100 player event with the Exeggutor, Superior, and the Celebi. You have another first place tournament top, 61 player event without Exeggutor. And what else we have here? A top 16, second place. Is this a third first place? First place of a 384 event using the Exeggutor. Now, another great benefit of playing grass that other decks do not have is the ability to use Erica. This is one of the main reasons why you'd want to play grass. Being able to heal for 50 damage where everyone else has a potion, heal for 20, that is absurd. That is so insane that this deck feels like it doesn't even have to use Mew, Tauros, or Druddigon because we're tanking with the Exeggutor plus Erica instead. So if you like grass, you like flipping coins, this will be the deck for you. And I guess if you have a way to search for a stage 2 or stage 1 Pokemon, this deck will only become better in the future alongside a deck like Charizard. Well, Charizard kind of counters this deck, but so I would say this has a good future viability. Do look out for that. Let's move on to a huge surprise. How is Mewtwo currently at Tier 2? It has dropped a bit. Initially, on the first week, Mewtwo was high Tier 1. But what happens when you are the #1 deck, you are now the #1 target to counter. And there are a lot of ways to counter the Mewtwo. Let's bring up the deck here. Even with that said, we have good things to say about this deck. Let's read the notes here. Mewtwo is continuing to perform strongly across various matchups. The addition of Mew as a tech option providing added versatility during Gyarados or mirror matches. Many players have also started including Jinx to counter Celebi decks, which are becoming very popular. With Gardevoir, Mewtwo remains a top pick for competitive play. Now, I think a big problem is while Mew helps Mewtwo, Mew also hurts Mewtwo. Any deck could play a Mew. With them playing Mew at 3 energy, the genome hacking is going to copy the Mewtwo and then one-shot that Mewtwo. That is definitely devastating, and it's going to make you scared to whip out your Mewtwo the entire time. So what do you do against the Mew? You have to kill it, but without Mewtwo, that's pretty much not going to happen. And I think that the Mewtwo getting walled off by random decks playing Mew is one of the biggest downsides of this deck because of the side drive being 150 damage against your 150 health. And because of the Mew countering Mewtwo, we're seeing a popular card being used in this deck to help counter the strategy, and that is the blue. During your opponent's next turn, all of your Pokemon take 10 less damage. So if you're going to be whipping out the Mewtwo, you're ready for it, but they have a Mew with coming up on 3 energy, you're going to have to activate blue, survive an attack from the Mew so that it does not deal 150, will deal 140 instead, and then you're going to counterattack with Mewtwo to one-shot that Mew. So definitely, you do have to just wait for the blue. In addition to the Mew being a counter and also a great addition to the deck, we also have the Mythical Slab. While everyone was waiting for a way to search for evolved Pokemon, Psychic Dex was the only one that was boosted by consistency through the Mythical Slab, as you can now look at the top card of your deck. If it's a Psychic Pokemon, add it to your hand, and even if it's not a Psychic Pokemon, that card on top of your deck goes to the bottom of your deck. So even by putting a non-Psychic to the bottom of your deck, you are now closer to drawing the Psychic Pokemon you wanted, aka evolving your Gardevoir or going into the Curlia. And you know, this will continue to see use until we see a card that says randomly add a stage 1 or stage 2 Pokemon or specifically search for an evolved Pokemon. A card that would specifically search for evolved Pokemon would be something like discard a card or 2 cards from your hand to then specifically pick up your deck and search for that evolved Pokemon. We also see a small addition, only using 10% of decks here, the Sigilyph. It has Spike Draw for 1 Psychic Energy. Simply draw 1 card. Now, let's see what is being used here in these decks. We have first place of a recent Pocket Thursday Cup, looking like that. We have second place playing the Sigilyph, just 1 Mew. We have first place, another recent tournament. We got 1 Mew, no Sigilyph. Now, playing Mew EX and a basic Mewtwo, that's quite interesting. Instead of playing 2 Mew EXs, I'm wondering if they're maybe free to play and they couldn't afford to play the other Mew X. I mean, why would you not play another Mew X? That's insane. Another deck playing just 1 Mew. This is something that I expected, and I thought that would definitely play 2 Mew EX in every version, but I think the Mythical Slab is why we're not seeing 2 Mew EX in every build. We want to have room for the Slab plus the other utility cards to also the main focus being our Mewtwo. Now, let's see. So in a way, I want to say that the deck is almost a victim of its own consistency. Because of the Mythical Slab making the deck more consistent, it drops the need for having 2 Mew. And then that's going to be harmful in other situations when you're being countered. Now, let's move on to Tier 1. Are you ready? Boom! Gyarados at Tier 1. It is the best deck, barely. Now, Gyarados, we can see right away. Gyarados is water. Pikachu is lightning, electricity, dealing more damage to Gyarados. So I would say while the meta was focused around Mewtwo being the #1 deck, it's now focused around Gyarados being the #1 deck. And because of that, that's going to boost up the power of Pikachu. If Gyarados were deleted and it was not a deck, I would say Mewtwo is currently in its current state better than Pikachu, but only because of that favorable matchup, Pikachu does jump up. Now, we will see on this tier list because it changes a lot. When new tournaments come in, the numbers are jumping up and down because there are so many freaking tournaments. I cannot believe it. I would not be surprised to see Mewtwo jump between Tier 1 and Tier 2 and back and forth. Celebi, I would say, is a solid Tier 2, though. Let's see what our write-up is on Pikachu. Why is Pikachu still doing well? What is going on? So with Pikachu, Pikachu remains a staple of the Tier 1 meta, holding its ground as one of the most reliable and powerful decks. While its presence has slightly dipped due to the rise of fighting-type decks adding Hitmonlee, which counter Gyarados, many are incorporating Zebra Strike for sniping Magikarp early, denying Gyarados' setup, and using Dedenne as a new utility Pokemon which replaced Pinchurin. Pikachu continues to stay strong. So what are we talking about? Magikarp, what the? Well, Magikarp is only 30 health. So if we could kill that Magikarp with something like the Hitmonlee, that's what a lot of people want to be doing. Let me type Hitmonlee correctly. There you go. 30 damage. So we're kicking the Magikarp. Oh my gosh. Perfect 30 health, perfect 30 damage. And then that being a popular strategy then harms Pikachu. When Pikachu's sitting here going, listen, I just want to stop Gyarados like all of you. So as you can see, everyone wants to beat Gyarados by either playing an electric type deck or playing fighting with Hitmonlee to kick the Magikarp. I'm sorry, that's just too funny. Now, the Zebra Strike also, this being a tanking meta, their best Pokemon is on their bench. Zebra Strike's going to get Zappin. Zap for 30 damage onto any Pokemon on the field. Now, This is not similar to Greninja. Greninja could be used from the bench. The Zebra Strike has to be your active Pokemon to be able to zap whatever card you want in the field. But if you could get that early Zebra Strike to kill that Magikarp, that is going to be wild. It's going to be a bit slower than a Hitmonlee because you don't have to evolve the Hitmonlee. So we basically have a lesser Hitmonlee through the Zebra Strike within the Pikachu strategy. Now, let's talk about Pikachu. This is going to deal 90 damage for just 2 of the electric energy. So if we look at Gyarados, Gyarados is very difficult to spell. Gyarados, oh, there we go. Gyarados. Gyarados is at 180 health, and it does take 20 more from Psychic. So for Pikachu, if it's at the max 3 bench Pokemon, 290 damage attacks without the weakness benefit will kill a Gyarados anyway. But what's great about the Pikachu dealing an extra 20 damage is, what about the potion? So now we have insulation from something like, I gotta type the potion here, to GY. The potion healing for 20 damage is now going to not be protecting you from a Pikachu, and that is great. So let me do the math real quick. We have a Circle Circuit dealing 80 damage, if you have 2 bench Pokemon, and then your second Circle Circuit with 3 bench Pokemon then does 110 damage. So you know what that means? That is going to mean that if you only have 2 bench Pokemon with the Pikachu, you are going to still be able to kill the Gyarados if only one of your attacks are with 2 bench Pokemon, and then your second attack has 3 bench Pokemon. Unfortunately, with 2 attacks with having 2 bench Pokemon, that's going to be 80 damage plus 80 damage, thus not enough for the Gyarados. But that also just going to overall make the Pikachu more consistent, where you're not relying on only having 3 bench Pokemon to make your play. And in addition to that, you know, I mean, what was there to say about Pikachu? It's fast, it's a basic, you can easily draw it at the start of the duel, it's only 2 energy to start doing tons of damage. This deck wins off of rushing your opponent down before they could set up. And despite the meta becoming a tanking meta and building up the bench, Pikachu is still tearing through the tanks and getting to that bench also through the Zebra Strike or just killing that active Pokemon early. Dedenne. So the main thing is when you're playing against a Pikachu deck, you know you're playing Pikachu well if you could almost audibly hear your opponent screaming at you to slow down, stop, you're killing me too quickly. Now, Dedenne, Thundershock. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon cannot act on the next turn. That is randomly really annoying. And against a Gyarados, that's 30 damage every turn. You're chipping down that Gyarados, and you could just completely lock them down if you're lucky with those coin flips. And we already talked about how good the Zebra Strike is. Now, another cool thing this deck could do is with Lieutenant Surge. This deck also is building up a power one-shot on the bench through your Raichu. The 140 damage Thunderbolt, you have to discard all your energy. It does cost 3. And when you're building up your Pikachu, it could be, you know, quite a while to get this Raichu ready. But with Lieutenant Surge, you maybe will have a good play where you could pull out your active Pokemon while it ideally will still have some electric energy on it. You're not spending all of your retreat cost on it. To then you follow up with Lieutenant Surge to move all energy from your bench Pokemon onto that Raichu for that one-shot attack. This will deal 160 to the Gyarados. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately for many, I would say fortunately, this is a good thing, you can't leaf into Lieutenant Surge in the same turn. That would be insane. Pull back your Pikachu while it still has its energy, and then put all active energy onto the Raichu. Ain't no way. Again, good that that is not a combo. Let's see the decks here. Now, you know what's missing? Where are the first places? Oh, there we go. December 28th. I mean, the meta mix moves so quickly. This is all like one day. I can't believe this. We'll also go to the first place page in a bit. So we have this getting first place, 64-player event. There's a lot of tournament top and decks. Go to the top decks page. You'll be able to see a much broader view. This dude's still playing Electrode. That's funny. And then we also have the mini Pikachu that a lot of people are using. This will deal 10 damage for each of your bench Pokemon, just a minier version of the Pikachu EX, which the EX is considered a different version of Pikachu, thus you're able to use both Pikachus in the same deck list. Now, are you ready for the #1 deck that I did not see coming? Let me know in the comments, did you see this deck coming? Did you know that Gyarados would be the best deck? Boom. What the hell is this? 30 health Magikarp. We have a 180 health Gyarados. Rampaging Whirlpool, 140 damage. Discard a random energy among the energy attached to all Pokemon, including your own Pokemon. Also, with this ability, a downside is the Pokemon you're killing, you could detach an energy from that Pokemon and then it knocks out that Pokemon, which it could also be considered a good thing because you're not then detaching from your own Pokemon. Why is this so good? Let's read the write-up on this real quick. The write-up says, Gyarados emerges as a new deck in Tier 1, acting as a bulky attacker capable of overwhelming most opponents with its raw power. Its ability to knock out virtually everything in the meta in one hit makes it a standout choice. The deck leverages Druddigon for tanking and Greninja for ensuring even the bulkiest of Pokemon are brought into the knockout range. However, Gyarados does struggle against Pikachu decks due to its electric type weakness, which does keep its dominance in check. Without Pikachu, Gyarados would probably be tier 0. Let's look at this craziness. Yeah, 180 health. If you're playing against a Mewtwo or even the Pikachu, we already talked about what it's going to take to kill it. The Mewtwo is going to take 2 side drives. Now, for the Gyarados, it will also take 2 rampaging whirlpools unless you have a Giovanni. So if it takes a while for you to build up your Gyarados, and by the time you draw out the most of your deck, the Giovanni is going to then, with the Gyarados, be a one-shot onto the Mewtwo. But even more popular to one-shot that Mewtwo too, you have the Greninja. So while you're sitting on the Druddigon, you're going to build up not just a Gyarados, you're also building up the Greninja. And once that Water Shuriken drops any of the opposing Pokemon to the 140 health range, that's when you're going to whip out that Gyarados, of course, comboed up with your Leaf. Leaf's going to be very important for this strategy. Leaf, pull the Druddigon back from the active spot, and then start rampaging, whirlpooling. Now, what makes this deck even more of a menace, because I think a reasonable thing to think is, why is this better than Golem? Well, a thing that could help with that is something like Misty. Misty randomly turning on the Gyarados early, that is going to be wild. I was watching a tournament gameplay clip where they rolled 2 coins. They flipped 2 heads with the Misty, and that was enough to put them so far ahead of the duel, getting that Gyarados its 3rd and 4th energy. They're then able to, on a later turn, leaf it back, summon the Gyarados, and then start rampage, whirlpooling like crazy. And once it starts going, that's it. They're just surrendering left and right. And, as we see here, Greninja is its favorite pair. Now, you could do something interesting here. We could type in Greninja. Yep, this is going to be the one, and we'll type in not using Greninja. So the deck's not using Greninja. You have an Articuno. Now, I do recommend playing Greninja. This is playing Vaporeon, Articuno. This is just playing straight up Gyarados. And then look at that, regular Gyarados and Meowth, quite interesting. But I do think Greninja is going to be the best way to play it. It's also worth noting, not only is Pikachu trying to counter the Gyarados through being electric energy, we already talked about this earlier, the Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee being able to stretch kick and kick that Magikarp out of the duel at only 30 health. So it's going to be very difficult to say what you should do here. Is at the start of a duel, if you put that Magikarp on your bench willy-nilly and you don't have a Gyarados ready, then you're maybe asking for a Hitmonlee early on to kill the Magikarp, or a Zebra Strike killing your Magikarp. So that's definitely something you gotta look out for, or, just get good and draw multiple Magikarps and not have to worry about your one Magikarp getting knocked out. And there you go. Let's see the deck list here. Top 4, top 4, top 8, top 8, top 8, top 16. Now, there's 2 more things in this video. We're gonna look at the first place tournament winning decks here. We'll look at the past 2 weeks since that's when the pack came out. Ready? Boom. First place. Pikachu's got the most first place finishes. We got Mewtwo, Celebi, Gyarados, I think was a little bit later into the pack's release before people started realizing how powerful the Gyarados was. But I'm here for the interesting stuff. Let's click on new cards. What? Pidgeot EX, this is not on a tier list, and it got first place. So I want you to be encouraged to play non-top tier decks and still do well with them. But DK, you're promoting this tier list and stuff. Yeah, but also we're promoting the rogue decks. Look at this. You know, one of the coolest thing on the website is scroll at the bottom of the page to see what's doing well, especially highlighting new cards. Play Melmetal, play Moltres, play Florges, play Venusaur, the Dragonite with new cards. What's Dragonite using? Dragonite is using the new Mew, and with the Budding Expeditioner and Leaf. What else? Using Druddigon. These are fun decks to be playing. You don't have to play top tier to win it all. So again, let's look at the Pidgeot EX, a nice rogue deck that may not be tier 3 or better, but still it is clapping up this tournament it joined. 200 player event. Imagine you join with your top tier deck and then you lose to a Pidgeot EX. What is this even doing? 3 energy, deal 20 damage more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That is going to be 140 damage if they have 3, 120 if they have 2. And then we also have Pokemon Flute. What the Flute? Put a basic Pokemon from your opponent's discard pile onto their bench, which then will boost up the Pidgeot. And it can be used alongside Professor Research. It's not a supporter card. And it could be used twice in the same turn. So your opponent's going to be looking at your Pidgeot EX and be laughing at you. They're going to be like, what are you doing with this non-top tier deck? This is trash. I have nothing on my bench. And you go, all right. Poke Flute. Oh, crap. Okay, got a little bit bigger. Still not killing my Pokemon. Poke Flute again. And now you are surprise one-shotting their active Pokemon with a double back-to-back Poke Flute, or at least that's what I would like to imagine happen in the duels they are winning. Now, comboed up with Victory Bell, what is this? Fragrance Trap. If this Pokemon's in the active spot, once during your turn, you may switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to its active spot. This seems like a funny deck. Okay, what else do we have as the tournament topping, winning tournaments? This is Executor, first place. Executor just with Mew, but also comboed up with Greninja. Greninja does not need water energy to water Sharuk and deal 20 damage anywhere on the field. That's a big thing you have to understand. I think other card games that are newer, like Hearthstone, would force Greninja to be only played with, let's say, a water type gym leader if we were playing as gym leaders. But the fact is, in Pokemon Pocket, you could play Greninja in any deck you want, even without the water energy. That is great. Now, Blastoise EX, get blasting. The basic tank strategy. Druddigon paired up with the Leaf as you build up your Blastoise on the bench, and then Blastoise will be blasting off for big damage. Hydro Bazooka is going to be scaling super high. If you have 5 water energy on the Bazooka, it's going to be dealing 160 damage. That is nuts. Let's see another first place tournament topping deck because it's new. Koga, multiple first place. This is one of the coolest decks that was tier 3 for a bit, but then is falling off because, you know, the thing is, a lot of people are focusing on the best deck being Gyarados and ways to counter it. But despite that, this is still a good deck to play with the brand new Whirlipede and Scolipede. So how this deck works is with the Weezing and Whirlipede, you're going to poison their active Pokemon, and then you're going to use Scolipede to deal an extra 50 damage on top of its 70. That's going to be 120 damage, and they burn for, poison for 10. That is not burn. At the end of the turn, every turn deal 10 damage to the poison, and then that extra 120 Venoshock for just 2 energy. We got double Leafs in here and double Koga. We are super returning our active Pokemon back to, well, we're retreating it or returning it back to the hand, and when returned back to the hand, that is considered a heal. That is great. What else do we have here that's getting first place? The Greninja is on the tier list already. We have Blaine. So quick Blaine decks, it did get boosted by this one just using Mew, actually. Not even using the new Rapidash. I think the other one's using the new one. There you go. This one is using the new Ponyta and one of the new Rapidash. It's going half and half. One of the old, one of the new for the Rising Lunge to deal that 60 on top of 40 damage if you flip that coin heads. This is a very cheap deck to play. No EX Pokemon in sight. Let's go on a few more, and then we're going to look at tier 4 decks very quickly. So there you go. Those are pretty much the non-top tier decks that were winning tournaments. So make sure you frequently check out the first place tag to see something special. So if you wanted to check out the Marowak or Wigglytuff winning a tournament despite them not using new cards, that is something you definitely want to see. Now, the Wigglytuff was December 16th. It was one day before the new pack came out, so also do consider that. Now, on the tier list, what is good here? We have tier 4. These are going to be honorable mentions. So I'm going to pop them all out, and we're going to be plowing through them very quickly. I'm not going to say too much about them. And some of them we already saw get first place of some recent tournaments. Blastoise. I think this deck will get a lot better if we have a way to search for the Blastoise with the War Turtle. We already talked about this. Huge bazookas. Here are a bunch of tournament top and deck lists, and you could definitely do well with this deck. You don't have to play tier 1 to be clapping it up. Don't let anyone shame you into playing the lesser water deck when Gyarados is definitely better than... Okay, I'm kidding. This is fine, okay? Now, we have Mew EX. Pure Mew. Mew, Hitmonlee, Marshadow, Tauros. What is going on here? This is quite funny. Hitmonlee, Hitmon, kill the Magikarp. Kick the Magikarp out of here. Marshadow to avenge your Hitmonlee, and also using Mew. All right, very interesting. Sure, funny deck here. Executor, I guess some people are teching in maybe one Celebi randomly, but it's mostly focused on the Executor. Sure, Tropical Swing. Easy, 1 energy, deal that 40 damage times another 40. Well, not times 40, but times 2 if you get that flipped coin heads. That's great. Here are a bunch of tournament top and deck lists. And what else we have here? Blaine. We were talking about how cheap and fun this deck is. It's going to rush the opponent down. Now, I'm shocked this even won a tournament, which we were seeing earlier. That is crazy. Then we have the Koga deck list. We already talked about this. Poison with the Whirlpede and the Wheezing, then finish them off with the Skullpede. Extra damage if they're poisoned. And then the Pidgeot we also talked about. There's lots of different ways to play this. That's why the deck breakdown is expanded so far down on the different ways to play the deck. Make sure you check them all out. And then we have Machamp, the final deck. Same strategy as the other decks. Build up the Machamp on your bench, tank with your Druddigon, or poke their Magikarp with Hitmonlee. Leaf your active Pokemon back to the hand, then get Machamped for 120 Mega Punching. Holy Mega Punch. Let's see what's good here. Top 16, top 8, top 32. That is great. And again, you don't have to play a top tier deck to have fun in this game. I do like covering what is doing well in the game, and I'm very much excited for the new card sets. It's worth noting that the next card set is a big card set. What we just got with Mew and Celebi is considered a mini set. This game will go back and forth. Every 6 weeks, it's going to be a mini set, then a big set. So definitely a major meta shakeup. If you decide to save your money or your gems and your pack pulls from this set and instead save it for the next big set, I think you're going to be greatly rewarded for it. So don't fear about FOMO. Don't fear on missing out on what's doing well with the Gyarados. If you want to pass on Gyarados and wait for the next set, this probably will not be tier 1 by the next set coming out. And with that said, I appreciate you very much. Make sure to check out PokemonMeta.com for all the events going on and all the tournaments. Every single tournament and all the top tournament decks that are at the top percentile are being posted on the website. It is great. Also, check out any card you want and then see the decks that it's being used in on the card type page. There's a lot more additions and things we're adding to the website that we have from the other websites. And also, don't forget the Discord, discord.gg/PokemonMeta. This is going to be the way to go into and get a whale into your Wonder Code share. If you add a whale to your friends list and they're whaling on packs, your Wonder Pack is going to be much better. This is currently the only exploit that is active in the game to get better packs, and it does work. I don't think that they're going to be fixing it because it does encourage people to spend money on the game and make them feel better that everyone wants to be their friend. And then also at the bottom of the page, you could just click on Discord on anywhere on the website to go to the Pokemon Pocket Discord. All right. I appreciate you all very much. Thank you for watching. We are out.